Hello everybody, my name is Paul Storm. I work for a company called Micrographics in Cape Town, South Africa. We are an Autodesk reseller, and in today's video I'd like to show you how nested links, or what we refer to in the industry as second tier links, would operate in the Autodesk Construction Cloud. Many of you, I'm sure, would be familiar with the concept. The concept is to have a Revit model representing some other buildings. So in this case, you'll see that there are two typical buildings or rooms. I've just drawn one as a 1 and the other one in the shape of a 2, the numeral 2, just to illustrate that it's two separate models. But in reality, what this might represent is a typical bachelor's apartment or a typical 2-bedroom apartment. It's going to be used on multiple floors and various different orientations within a building, all with the same layout. In other words, any typical room. Now, there is some discussion in the industry, should you use that as a link until you've locked the design down, in which case you can bind the links and start populating the data for things like the door numbers, or should you use groups? Now, in the past, I've been partial to groups, but there are positives and negatives to each one of those strategies. Regardless, you will most probably find yourself involved in a project some other time where the architect or whoever is involved will start using links representing the typical building layout, right? And just note that in the typical sort of way that guys work in the industry is they would, just drawing a bit of a wall over there, is that they would write this out first from the group. So they would create a group, and from that group they would be able to right click and write this out, save it out as, but over here you can see no such ability. You can't save this file out. You can't go to the group and say save this group out. You can't save this group out into the save group, and then it won't save it out directly as a cloud model. Alright, so you'd first have to go through a bit of a process to be able to save that out as a cloud model. So it's quite interesting. It seems that since 2023, when I last looked at it, that is available, but you still have to initiate the cloud model. So it's interesting. Of course, the software evolves every year. So what this represents then is an external file that's linked into our file. You will find them under the manage links. I've already brought them in, obviously, just to expedite matters. I've already done most of the work in preparation, but just by way of explanation, what are we looking at? We are looking at our links, and there you can see that there's some links coming in. Now, each one of those links, of course, has its own instances. If you go to one of these and you select all instances in project, you can see that there are 4 of these items selected. And if you had to go to the visibility graphics overrides of your links, you will see that there's overrides per instance. That's what the number refers to, as well as per type. Right, so we're not going to delve into those intricacies during this course or during this webinar. It doesn't deal with this. It simply mentions that we can have multiple instances of a specific file. And in this case, if we look at these files are also, I've created one as a Revit cloud model. I can maybe illustrate that for you on the actual project on the cloud. In our work in progress folder, this is important. If you are not familiar with the concept of a work in progress, we'll talk about that shortly. This is the typical way in which a project is set up. Of course, there's no prescribed way in which you are required to work on the cloud, but we do like to follow the BIM level 2 compliancy. We'll explain that as well as we go through with this course. But for the moment, I just want to explain the Revit file that we are looking at. So in my setup of my folders, we've got the work in progress folder. Within that, we've got the general architectural task team. Within the general architectural task team, we've got one of the teams, in this case Micrographics Team 1, FX1. We also have Micrographics FX2, just to illustrate that we can accommodate vertically integrated companies with multiple teams in one discipline. And there is the team that we are talking about. So in this teams folder, a team folder is a group of people that are working together on a model. We will find that we have our Revit files. So these I've already created. There are 3 of them. The one is on a zone called B1, and then there's also a zone called BA and a zone called BB. The way that my naming protocol works is that B1 would refer to a building that can have multiple zones. So we can have 26 letters or 26 very large buildings on a site with 10 zones each. And so I'm also incorporating that into a type of a skyscraper arrangement, where the typical arrangements, and I'm using B, the typical arrangement would qualify as a mono file or a monozone file, BA, and the next one BB, referring to building 1 and building 2. And so that would be the idea here. I've just forgotten to put it into the comments. Of course, that's important. We'd like to know which buildings we are dealing with. Building number 1 will just be the numeral, the building that looks like numeral 1, and building number 2 would just look like numeral 2, and then this of course would be tier 1. So buildings BA and BB, which would be the typical room designs, will be loaded into the tier 1 model called B1. In other words, or in plain English, this is the skyscraper. These are 2 of the typical rooms that will repeatedly be linked into the skyscraper. 2 of these files are cloud workshed files. You'll see that it looks like a cloud with 2 people. So there's more than one person that's working on this file. It's typically a workshed file. And then one of these files was created as a cloud model, once again representing a file that is a little bit different from a normal Revit file. The difference between a cloud file and a normal Revit file is that cloud files resolve the first part of the file path when they are linked, because we can link them in as cloud references, firstly, and secondly, they avail themselves to being updated year by year. If you look at something like the upgrading of the models, you can upgrade your Revit Cloud Model Upgrade from year to year. At the moment, everything is upgraded to the latest version, and so there won't be anything available. But if you have your models, all the cloud models within this project will automatically be updated if you had to press that button. And in fact, that is what I've done to this project earlier this year. So cloud models, if you have a large portfolio of Revit drawings or buildings that are in existence, digital twins, and you think you might, as a property developer or just as an architect, continue with that building in future, either modifying it, creating a new phase for it, or maybe doing something else, then you've always got those Revit files ready to go, because you would have updated them to the latest version. So that's what we're dealing with at the moment. So one non-workshed typical drawing, which just has the cloud, one workshed typical model, which is cloud workshed, just to show you that both are possible, as well as the container file, the tier 1 file that we will observe linking in, specifically thinking now if we are the mechanical engineer or the structural engineer and we want to bring this file into our model, then how are we going to handle that? Just with regards to the BIM level 2 compliancy, what typically happens is that we treat the Teams folder as a silo. We don't let other people have access to that. But at a specific time, you're able to share via a process that we call package sharing. And if you do have one of these design collaboration modules or subscriptions, then you would be able to utilize the ability to create a package, first of all, to share that, and then to consume that package. So there's a workflow that is built around the design collaboration and the sharing and the consuming of packages. The result of that is at a specific time, the file that's within the task teams or teams folder is copied from the work in progress folder, which to all intents and purposes are hidden from everybody else, to a shared folder in which most people would, or everybody would, have view and download permissions on the files that are stored over here. And when a file is consumed, say by the mechanical engineer, then the mechanical engineer will have the files copied once more from the shared folder into their consumed folder under the relevant team that they have consumed. The advantage of doing it this way is that the permissions are inherited from the team's folder. The team would have edit permission, so you will have edit permission on these files. In other words, you've got control of these files. That is not a problem, because if we ever have to compare files, if something went wrong, we would always refer to what we call the one version of the truth, which is the record that is kept within a shared folder, and it is versioned as you would update that file. So there you can see there are various versions, and these versions can be slip sheeted. That means it could be rolled back to an earlier version if necessary, and the metadata that is associated with that would also change accordingly. So that, in short, is the BIM level 2 compliancy that we are talking about. And when we are working with Revit Cloud workshed models, it presents a problem for us. Well, an opportunity, I suppose, but in essence, a problem. So when we are in the mechanical team, we will be working on our mechanical model. Here we can see that we're also working on B1, but the discipline is MX, General Mechanical. And so the problem is that we can link in the first tier, no problem. It will simply link it in from this consumed folder. But the second tier link poses a problem. There we are going to get stuck. So how do we work around this? Well, there are two solutions. The one solution is that you simply link in the files directly from the work in progress folder. Now, I would highly dissuade you from doing this, because the teams folder, or the work in progress folder in which the architects are creating their models, is a work in progress. In other words, the information isn't ready to be shared. Most possibly, they're still deciding what they are going to do with the design. If you were the mechanical engineer and you would have to do your designs based on information that is in flux, you would be wasting your time and resources and paying a lot of money, going through a lot of trouble, and then just having to change things afterwards again. The same thing with the structural engineer. So I don't see that as a viable solution. Instead, there aren't many disciplines, I would say, that use this methodology, mostly architects. But with a little bit of extra work on the architectural side, you can get around this limitation. And so that's what we'll be focusing on. The trick is to work inside of this area as the architects with the second tier links linked into this model, and then to do a two-tranche approach to sharing packages on sharing day. The first tranche would be your second tier models. Then to take your first tier models and repath the attached links to the files that are in the shared folder. And then to share the first tier link. So that would resolve all the problems that the other disciplines might have with your files in terms of the second tier links being linked into the first tier links when they link the files into their mechanical model. You obviously don't want to, just again, but in the BIM level 2 compliancy scenario, you don't want to be altering files, second tier links, BB and BA, that's within your shared folder directly. And so once you've published your packages, or once you've shared your packages with the first and the second tier links, or the second tier links being repathed within the first tier link, what you will do on the file that you are working with in your work in progress folder is to revert back to the links, excuse me, there's the team, is to revert back to the links that point at the work in progress folder, not the shared folder. So there's a procedure to follow on sharing day where you change the link paths and then share your files with the other disciplines. And after that, if you want to edit one of those typical designs, then you would have to repurpose that link onto the file within the work in progress folder, alter the work in progress folder second tier, go through a 2-tranche package sharing scenario again. The first tranche, share the second tier models. In the first tier models, change the link paths to the shared folder, and then publish the first tier models after that. I say publish, but of course it is sharing the package. So that's the process. We can perhaps demonstrate that. So in this case, looking at our manage links, our folder is pointing towards the shared folder, and that's pointing towards the shared folder. Now, that is of course the second tier links. Now, if I want, and I put them on as attachment as opposed to overlay, because with an overlaid attachment, the recipient would have to load all those second tier links into their model. You don't want that. You want just the guy just to link in your 2-tier model and for everything to be there. So that's pretty easy. This must be attachment, or it makes sense that it is attachment. But now when we are going to edit our file, what we would have to do is we are just going to reload that BB from our work in progress folder, and the same with, so there we can see it's an external reference, and what that means is that the paths get resolved. Usually your files are stored on your C drive, and then under users, and then your name, and so everybody's name is going to be different. But when you use cloud models like this, it ignores the first part of the name and it resolves that inconsistency, so everybody's link paths stay intact. Alright, so we'll just re-link the second tier models from our work in progress folder. There's our BB file, and then we'll do the same with VA, just to show that it works for both of those types of files. Reload from. It's usually a bit of a mission just to get down into the correct folder. You can of course put shortcuts up there if you're just operating in one discipline. I unfortunately can't do that most of the time. So for me, I just navigate to where I need to be. There's BA. And we open the BA link from our work in progress folder. And then once that is loaded, we can just synchronize and save the changes. So if we want to edit one of these, we can open and unload. What that will do is unload the link within this model, and then we'll be working directly within that linked model. Okay. And then within the same instance of Revit, we can actually operate in that link. The equivalent in AutoCAD would be something like editing an XREF in place. I'll just put a door in there and synchronize. This one is a cloud workshed model. And then we can close that. We can reload this. And there you can see the door being propagated through all the links. And you should be able to do exactly the same with your cloud model, which of course isn't workshed. Put a door in there as well. This case we can't synchronize, we just save, it's just a normal cloud file. File close. Then we would reload this. The next thing that we're going to have to do is to publish our models. We go to our Home tab, refresh the icon. Now BB and BA are the ones that we are going to publish latest without links. So while that's busy publishing, I'll change the pathing of our links again. So I'll manage links. And I'll change this by reload from, and I'll path it to the shared folder again. Of course, we haven't shared the latest links, but we're publishing them. So next we'll share the packages, so that should be fine. We're going to put them in the shared folder, or we're going to link them in from the shared folder. This is an old version. It will be the one without the door, but it will of course update just now for the other guys. So that is within the shared folder now. This one also reload from. That is now pathed to the shared folder. That's BB. So what you should see next is that the typical rooms now appear without the doors because it's repathing to an old file. That's fine. We'll then also synchronize and modify these settings and relinquish all our work sets. We can then close this file and we can publish the latest version of the Tier 1 model as well. There is our Tier 1 B1 model. We'll publish latest again without links. That just means that we don't save the links alongside in the drawing. So it doesn't add to the memory of the drawing. That's typically what we do. It's applicable to Revit models mostly, AutoCAD drawings and link topographies and so on. They act a bit differently, so you have to unload them, unfortunately. That is not impacting what we are doing over here. In any case, those files are now publishing. So in our Teams folder, we can see that that Tier 1 model is now updating. The Tier 2s have already updated. So what I can do now is the tier, actually in this case, because it's already been initiated, I don't need a two-step process. I can just share all these files in one package. If it was the first time around, I would share these two first, go back into this file, change the path to the shared folder, and then publish this one. But because they're already in the shared folder, I can just now share a normal package. So over here, I can go to the correct team. I am in the correct team. I'm in AXFX1. I can create my package. Now I can say in that package that I want to include those models. Hopefully that model has published. It's still busy publishing, but it will be BB and BA. Let's see if we can choose that. Let's say save. Let's publish or share. Yep, we'll share that package. And then we will, as the mechanical team, consume that package. So if this, what you're seeing at the moment is unfamiliar to you, if you're not familiar with the licenses and how they operate, if you have a BIM manager, otherwise you can always phone us. But we now, because I'm the admin on this project, I can assume different personalities. So I can be MXFX1 and I can consume the architectural package that was shared. There it is, and I can consume that package, consume. So that's excellent. And now let's just see what the files are looking like in my mechanical teams consumed folder. There I can see that this file is still busy publishing. What's nice about these packages is even though the file is busy publishing, you just have to wait for it to resolve itself. But it does propagate, so that's fine. In terms of our Revit model that we'll be looking at is our mechanical team folder. In the mechanical team folder, we'll see that we've got our FB1 Tier 1 model, which I'll open now. Good practice usually is to specify work sets. I've come across some inconsistencies with South African coordinate system recently where I do this by default now, especially with very large coordinate differences. It does tend to resolve itself, but I know from experience, at least in 2018, 2019, that mechanical spaces sometimes didn't generate as expected when you're dealing with a multidisciplinary environment. So good practice generally is just to switch off the worksets when you open a file. It also limits the amount of data that you bring in. Then you can choose which data you're going to switch on within your model. In this case, I'm going to switch on everything. There we go. Let's see how the publishing of that model is now complete. So there is our B1 model within the consumed folder. So we should see the doors in here. Let's have a look. There's our B1 model. Of course, these second tier links are now pathed towards the shared folder. So they're pointing towards the one version of the truth. There's 3D. It's not showing up at the moment in this file. So with the viewer, it seems that there's an issue. But with the actual Revit file, it resolves itself. And just as a matter of interest, we might also want to have a look at the mechanical federated model. So let's just go to the mechanical federated model and have a look at the project model. If we had a look at, let's see, we've got B1 from mechanical, we've got B1 from architectural, Those we can switch off. Alright, so there seems to be a bit of a discrepancy over here. At least it's not compiling it as nicely as what we would like within the federated model. But then of course these files are not using the same coordinate system, so there's maybe a heads up for those of you that know what's going on or that can read between the lines. You would have to use your Revit model until you bind those models to manage that. It might turn into a bit of an issue. The alternative, of course, is to use groups, which is my preference, but like I said, you don't always get what you want. But you can definitely see that the links are now propagating from the shared folder into the into the proper folder. So I think it's still got some weak points, especially with regards to visualizing the model. So of course, if this is my mechanical model, if I had to visualize this mechanical model as a federated model within the cloud, I would expect to see what I need to see there. But as we saw, even though those second tier and first tier links are switched on, they're not appearing in the correct place. So the platform isn't built around this two-tier nested linking, which could make it interesting to work with. So my recommendation originally stands that you can either use groups or you can work at risk, which again, that's on you, but I wouldn't recommend. Well, it might be a bit disappointing, but I hope at least that you can understand the way that we work with these files now, the first and second tier links within the cloud. And until next time, enjoy Revit.